The fight over who will fill Justice Ginsburg's seat is setting up Senate lawmakers to flip positions from the ones they held during the last presidential election year when a similar issue was at play. Almost 8 months before the 2016 election. Let me just say that one more time. 8 months before the 2016 election, President Barack Obama nominated Merrick Garland to take the seat left empty by the sudden death of Antonin Scalia. At the time, Senate Majority Leader Mitch McConnell refused to hold hearings for Garland. He said voters should choose who would get to nominate someone to fill the seat. Democrats blasted McConnell for that position. Now the arguments over whether or not that Senate should vote on a nominee are falling along opposite party lines. Let's bring in Nancy Cordes, who is following all of this. Nancy, great to see you. You know, the thing about what happened back in 2016, Nancy, so people can understand, and I just want a little bit more of that history. It wasn't as if Merrick Garland appeared before the Senate Judiciary Committee, and the Republicans or some senators took opposition to his positions, to his judicial writings. He didn't even get a moment. He didn't even get a hearing. He wasn't even considered by Mitch McConnell.
Correct. Correct. From the very beginning, Mitch McConnell said that as leader of the Senate, it was his prerogative to hold up this nomination. And he said that there would be no Supreme Court nominee considered until after the election because it was an election year. Now, of course, he is saying the opposite. The argument he's making is that this is not hypocritical because back then in 2016, we were in divided government. You had one party controlling the White House, another party controlling the Senate, and now, of course, Republicans control both the White House and the Senate. But I have to say, Vlad, that this is a case he came up with after the fact. At the time, back in 2016, when we asked him about this repeatedly, what he said is, it's an election year, we have to wait. And it's only afterwards that he and other Republicans, once President Trump was victorious, began to say, well, that was a situation of divided government. It's not the case anymore. So it was a bit of a retroactive argument that he is making and that many other Republicans are making as well. Look at Lindsey Graham. He's the chair of the Senate Judiciary Committee. As recently as 2018, he said point blank, we will not consider a Supreme Court nominee in an election year, in 2020. You can take it to the bank, you can hold me to it. Now, of course, he is saying the exact opposite. He is saying that you have to listen to his words now, not his words then. And that's significant because he is the chair of the Senate Judiciary Committee. He's going to be the one to oversee confirmation hearings.
Nancy, one of the arguments that Senator Graham has made on Twitter, he complained about the way Democrats treated the nomination of Brett Kavanaugh, but he also talked about the nuclear option, right? And it's interesting, a lot of Republicans are blaming the former Senate Majority Leader Harry Reid, who back in 2013, as you know, used that, what people call the nuclear option, to eliminate the 60-vote rule on executive branch nominations and federal judicial appointments, but importantly, not for the Supreme Court. That decision to include the Supreme Court came in 2017, led by Mitch McConnell. So how can they blame the Democrats for the way that the system is right now when, in fact, when it comes to SCOTUS, it was the Republicans who implemented this rule?
Well, they're going to argue that it was simply arbitrary, that Democrats pulled the nuclear option but left Supreme Court nominees at a 60-vote threshold, and so they were just following up on the precedent that Democrats had already created. I have to tell you, Vlad, I don't think that charges of hypocrisy are going to be a huge concern for Republicans in the coming weeks. And that is because the prize here is just so great. This is something senators live for, the chance to confirm a Supreme Court nominee who shares your views. It comes up so seldomly. This is one of the reasons that senators take office. It's one of their highest honors. And so I think with that prize in mind, Republicans are willing to put up with some charges of hypocrisy coming from the left. And I think the only thing that would really give them pause is if they thought that it would hurt them at the ballot box. But for some of them, you know, they're not up for re-election for several years. So that's a far off concern, whereas this is something that they're dealing with right now.
That's an excellent point, Nancy, one that I hadn't thought of, that this has a lot to do with the legacy of some of these politicians, some of these lawmakers, something that people should consider when they look at this fight, they look at the strategy being deployed on both sides. Real quick, I want to ask you, before I ask you about Collins and Murkowski, what's also, I think, sort of interesting to me is the question you just posed, Nancy, about the polls. Is Mitch McConnell willing to lose the majority on this battle, on this fight? If he knows, if he gets the sense that the Republicans could lose the majority and it's already in play, will that shift his thinking or no?
I think that that's a great question, Vlad, and I think Mitch McConnell is very pragmatic. He's got two big goals here: shift the Supreme Court to the right, hold on to his majority in the Senate. It's possible that those two goals could diverge. So what does he do? Well, we're still waiting to find out whether he wants to try to push this through, hold a vote before the election or afterwards. That could be a big clue to his thinking and how he feels this could affect the election. Back in 2016, he has said repeatedly that one of his best strategic moves was to dangle the possibility that that seat could be filled by a conservative to voters who were maybe turned off by President Trump, but who really cared about the Supreme Court. Those suburban voters who were perhaps more moderate, didn't like some of the things then candidate Trump was saying, but did care about other issues. It was a way to get them to stop thinking about checking the box for President Trump and start thinking about checking the box for the party writ large. He may try to do that again and hold confirmation hearings before the election, but wait to hold a final vote on this nominee until after the election. That is a risky move. What happens if President Trump loses the election, Republicans lose their majority, but they have this lame duck session and they push this nominee through anyway? You can imagine the kind of uproar that could create. And going even further, Vlad, what if the outcome is still up in the air? What if these ballots are still being counted? We know it's going to take a long time to count mail-in ballots. What if the outcome of the presidential election is still in doubt? And that's when all of this comes to a head. We've never seen a scenario like that before.
And you are short one justice on the Supreme Court, Nancy, which is, something that people need to think about if this election makes it to the Supreme Court, just like Bush v. Gore did. And so in that light, Nancy, those Republican senators like Susan Collins and Lisa Murkowski, who've said that the Senate should wait until after the election to vote on the Supreme Court justice, it's interesting to me, they're just saying wait to vote on it until after the election. I know a lot of people are on social media saying, well, they're against anybody right now, but they may be completely in line with Mitch McConnell and other Republicans when that person is nominated by the president. It's just that they want that cover to wait until after the election, but then it brings up all these other issues that you raised.
Right, and I think there's another factor for Collins and Murkowski here, which is that they are both pro-choice, and the president is likely to nominate someone who is pro-life and tilt the court even further to the right in a way that could endanger Roe v. Wade and other abortion decisions. So that is definitely factoring into their decision-making. The reality is that Democrats would need 4 Republicans, not 2, to side with them in order to block this nomination, and it's very hard to see right now, Vlad, who those other 2 Republicans would be. I know we're going to be watching for Mitt Romney. He's been willing to buck the White House in the past. We'll be watching Cory Gardner, who's locked in a tough re-election fight in Colorado. But, I think it would be political suicide, most likely, for Cory Gardner to break with the president now. It would really discourage his base in advance of an election. He has been very careful not to distance himself from the president in recent months. I'm not sure why he would do it now. And Mitt Romney is also beholden to a large pro-life Mormon base in Utah. So, yes, perhaps Democrats can peel off one more Republican, but I think getting to 4 is going to be very, very hard.
And Nancy, there's just one other thing, too, that when I think about this, and you mentioned the pro-life, the folks who are pro-life, the country has moved away from opposition to Roe v. Wade, right? I mean, every poll, including the ones that we take here at CBS News, shows that the United States of America, if it were 20 years ago or 30 years ago, certainly you had huge opposition to that. But people have come to accept it. It is, there is strong support in this country across all states for Roe v. Wade. Do these senators think about that at all, or is it just about pleasing that evangelical base?
They think about it, but I think it's partly pleasing the evangelical base, and partly it's their own conviction. I think a lot of Republican senators genuinely believe that Roe v. Wade was decided wrongly, no matter what the public polling says. Democrats, on the other hand, have been really trying to fire up their activists, their progressives, their base, because they see that the only power they really have here, the only leverage they have to slow this down, is immense public pressure. That means huge protests. That means people swamping the phone lines at the Capitol with complaints. That's the only thing that is really going to potentially have an impact on this process. And so I think it's very possible in the coming weeks we could see some of those huge protests that we've seen around the country over other issues kind of migrate to Capitol Hill.
Nancy Cordes, I know we went a little long, Nancy, but I learned so much in just the 6 or 7 minutes that you and I spent this morning talking about this, and I know our audience did too. So thank you very much.
Always have plenty of time for you, Vlad.
Thanks, Nancy.